Hi, it's Sharon from SharonTheReader.com. This one is about Carrie Fisher. Now, I am not a Star Wars fan, never saw the movies. I think there was 2 or 3 or 4, I'm not sure. All I do remember was the hairstyle that she had for those movies. And I think everybody remembers the hairstyle because it was so weird. It was like, 2 things at the side of her ears. So I'm not a Star Wars fan. I'm not a sci-fi fan. The only sci-fi movie that I really fell in love with was The Matrix. And that knocked me out. So Star Wars went over my head. No interest in seeing it. Just wasn't my type of movie. I will say a lot of people come to the side of my bed when they want to talk, and they will kind of give you it in a one piece the whole way through. That is not how Carrie did it. I would say over this past maybe month or so, bits and pieces and words and sentences and things and things that she would tell you. It's like last week I was getting out of my car and just out of nowhere she said, "Did I ever tell you Elizabeth Taylor gave me a sapphire ring?" And I said, "No, I don't believe you ever mentioned that." She said, "Oh, she did." She said, "She gave me a sapphire ring and it was platinum." I was never a big jewelry person myself, but I didn't wear it often, but I always had it. And I thought, okay, fine. This is obviously something you won't put out. So, it's as simple as you're getting out of your car and she'll have a conversation with you. As a kid, she said, I knew I was too much. I was too loud. I was too happy. I was too sad. She said, I always was too much. And I think you're probably talking about the real young Carrie Fisher, maybe 5, 7, round about that age, was what I was seeing anyway. And she said, I could see it in the reaction of people around me, that they thought this was a little bit strange. So she knew that there was something was a little bit more than your average. But, I mean, let's face it, what kid is not loud or quiet or laughing or crying, Kids let their emotions out all the time. For her to say that, there must have been like a code or something that you had to be a certain way. And I'm not blaming this on anyone in particular. I'm just saying she knew herself by the reaction that she was just too loud, too jolly, too much was her thing. Okay? At home, a lot of things were always going on. Things were always changing all the time. So I got quiet. I got very quiet. This seemed to help everyone, including me. I'd find a corner in the room or another room alone and I would read. I could read my way out of everything. Books became my reality. In a quiet room or corner in the house, I could create my reality in a book. And the quietness seemed to be something that seemed to work for everybody. It was kind of like, yes, it's Carrie, she's quiet. So I think at the end of the day, she had found, it seemed to me, the way she was showing me it, that yes, that was acceptable. The other part of Carrie, the very loud, laughy, sad, unhappy, whatever, that was too much for everyone to take in. The quiet Carrie, and we're talking probably now maybe 8, 9, maybe even 7, totally different. So people could handle that quiet child, slightly introverted even. And she said for herself, she realized that this was definitely the way to go. This was her protection. This was also a reality that she found for herself. Find a quiet place, find the book you want to read, get into it, and let that world open up to you. And then move the other world, that being the real world that she was living in, move that out of the way. And it satisfied people. No one had a problem with that. And it satisfied her because it protected her. And it also gave her a release of other people's lives in books. So that was young Carrie as well. She said, I didn't eat much, mostly snacks, but I was small, so it was okay. Sometimes my mum would say, Carrie, you need to sit down at the table and eat. Then she would stop worrying. So there was something about, I suppose her mother would kind of say, normality. Let's have more normality. Let's sit down at the table and eat properly. Where what I was seeing was she could go in, make herself a sandwich, grab a banana or something like that there, bring it into the room with her, maybe a glass of milk or something, and just sit and read for hours and not think about food. But then, as she said, she was small in height. She was a small kid. And so therefore, it wasn't noticeable. She wasn't losing weight. I mean, there was plenty of food in the house. She could help herself. Just now and again, her mum kind of felt, need to spend more time as a family. Need to get that sort of normality feel. And then when she kind of got that normality feel, she could stop worrying about Carrie and these corners and rooms and books that she would get herself into and that quietness. But I got the impression that it was working for everybody at that stage. So no one was particularly worried. Not even herself. She was happy. She said, but the thing was that she was starting to drift away. So she could be sitting at the table eating, but without anyone noticing, and even herself, because she was quiet, it was just that she seemed to be drifting away. And she said, someone should have noticed something was wrong. But what's the difference in a quiet child or a child who's drifting? Really, no one was to blame. And she could feel it, but she didn't know what it was. So there was something was starting to kick in at that stage with her. And it is true, when you think about it. You've got a quiet child, and at the end of the day, you're sitting having dinner, and you would ask the kid how things are, and they say things are good, and you're having a normal conversation, and maybe the child isn't giving too much to it, but then they're a quiet kid. So why would anyone think that there was anything wrong? She felt that she was drifting away. And as she said, someone should have noticed. But then she said, but who would notice? Who would notice something like that? She noticed something herself. But it is true, that could happen very easily, that no one else would notice. Especially if you're doing what you do and you're washing, you're dressing, you're cleaning your teeth, you're putting on your clothes, you're doing all the things that normal children do. At the end of the day, why would anyone think now that there's anything changing? At one stage you were boisterous, now you're not boisterous anymore. Now you've a couple of years have passed, you're nice and calm, everything's wonderful. No, I can see where she can see herself. Someone should have noticed. But also, why would anyone notice? And how could she explain that to anyone? How do you say, I'm drifting away? She said, as I reached my teenage years, I was very given to having panic attacks, anxiety attacks. But they would come and they would go. And people used to say, oh, Carrie's lost it. And I know I had. But what was it I had lost? So this, she knew this didn't feel right, but it was never, nothing was diagnosed, so she'd lost it. You know, she was having a moment, let's put it like that. I think that was how it was accepted or put off. But she said, my mum was good. She could shake me out of it. If I needed to be slapped out of it, she could do it. And the way she showed me it, it wasn't a vicious, violent thing. It was kind of like, pull yourself together, get a grip. And then she said, I found pills helped. Of course, no one knew, but the pills were easy to get, especially where I was. Most everyone was on something or other. So now I think we're starting to see where Carrie really started to find something to kind of hold herself together. But apparently, yes, her mother knew about the anxiety attacks. She also knew how to handle them, if that's what you want to call handling them. And I suppose also, even the way she puts it herself, the way she told me about it was, her mother could control this. She could actually do something. She could shake her. She could slap her if necessary. And not in a bad way. When I say not in a bad way, not in a way of anger or temper. It was kind of like, pull yourself together. And she said it worked. It actually did work for her. But what she did find worked much, much, much better, and this was something her mother didn't know about, was tablets and pills. She said they were the thing that really worked for her. They were her go back to. So I'm taking this now as 14, 13, 15, right about that age. Not a child anymore, not a complete adult either. Drama school, she said, was the next thing. I don't think I really wanted to be an actress, but I had to be something. And me being something was essential for my mother. But she did do it for the right reasons. My mother knew how hard life was. I hated her for it. That's the first time we're hearing anything like that. Making decisions about my life because she had to do something to ground me. So we're getting a lot of anger starting to come in there. And the strange thing about Carrie when she was talking and when, as you're communicating with her, is she is the least angry person you would ever encounter. In actual fact, you would almost get the impression she's a pushover, if that makes sense. She's very, very open. She's a very open personality and a very warm personality and a very understanding personality. And that's the thing with her is, when you hear her talking about the anger there, I hear her talking about it, but she never showed me it. That part was not shown. She showed me the child, she showed me the young teenager, she showed me the very young Carrie, but the anger, no. That was never, I was never shown that. I'm not saying she told me. We even have how she dressed and things like that here. She said, surprising myself, I really did love drama school. It made me feel free, normal, whatever that was. Being me was okay. I was okay. Believe me, I could still get the pills. So I remember that being a happy time in my life. I had normal friends who came from normal backgrounds. I loved it. I seldom wore makeup and usually wore dark clothes. I was just like everyone else. So that seemed to be a period in her life where although the pills were there, I just wondered if she had been able to just be Carrie. not Debbie Reynolds' daughter, not Eddie Fisher's daughter, would Carrie have been a different personality? And it's just me wondering. I'm not sure. I doubt it probably, to be honest with you, because she's already talked about the anxiety attacks. She's already talked about the pills. She even made a point of making sure that no matter how normal things were for her, at drama school with her normal friends, which she seemed to be having a ball. And I don't mean that she was out of line. She certainly wasn't out of line. What I saw was a very normal teenage girl, who basically was just plain. She just liked to be very plain in her looks and in her clothes. But somewhere there was still that need for tablets and pills. So that was just interesting. So we often wonder, if that person hadn't have had that life, would it have been different? But I would honestly say, from the fact that she's telling me things like that, no, I don't think so. My anger for my mother grew, as did my sarcasm and wit. My mother wanted so much from me, all the things I couldn't be. The more she wanted from me, the more angry I became. And it was a volcanic anger. It was kind of like, I don't want to be near you. Get away from my life. Get away from my world. It was like that. It was very, this I have surrounded myself with now. Like she'd surrounded herself with the books and she'd found peace there. Now she'd surrounded herself with drama school and with her own friends. And they were nowhere close to where she lived. They were nowhere close to her mother. They were not friends that she'd had before. These were new people. And they allowed for her just to be herself. And that was interesting, because then you start to see Carrie really being Carrie. And she didn't wear a lot of makeup. From what I was seeing as she was walking down corridors and things, this was a girl who pulled on whatever she had in the morning to wear, combed her hair, walked out through the door. Do you know what I mean? There was no fancy clothes or funky clothes or anything of that type. Anything but that. Very plain, just very much like everyone else around her, and very accepted for who she was, which was just simply Carrie. And I can understand that, because she's a very easy person to accept. I mean, she's a stunningly easy person to accept. That's the thing, And maybe that's the part that, when she said everyone knows this, maybe this is what she means, that you don't know this part of her. I don't know. The greatest defense anyone who doesn't feel they really have anything that is real as a human being is sarcasm and sharp wit. It always leads you out of difficult situations, and it saves you in more ways than anyone can ever imagine. You can live on it, but it won't nourish you. A bit like fish and chips instead of steak and salad. Whatever her defense mechanism and her wit and her sarcasm, it was something that she really worked on. I'm not saying she didn't have it. I don't think that's something that you can actually perfect unless you have the essence of it in you. But it was something that she really worked on for her own reasons. And to me, truthfully, that was where Carrie pushed everybody away, while pulling everybody in to think that this was her. But this was a very sad lady. I mean, I really mean that. She was a sad child. There's no doubt what I saw was a very sad kid. She was a happy teenager when she was alone. After that, I think a lot of sadness came into Carrie Fisher's life. And she did not know how to handle it. And that sarcasm and that wit would have been a great defense mechanism, at any point in her life, because you're hitting cardboard. You're not hitting a person because you're not getting near that person. They're deflecting right, left, and centre, and she deflected. And I think she deflected right up until the end of her life, from what I saw. Which really, when you know her and when you've spoken to her, is really sad, because she was so warm. She was so witty. There was a few lines, and I can't remember them now, but there was just a few things that she came off with. One was, I was a professional fuck-up. When I put myself out there, I did it for awards. So you think, really, you're really making that much fun of yourself and what you did and why you did it was so sad that you felt you couldn't be you. And the real her, is so soft. It's unbelievable. So easily hurt. That you just think, why did life have to be so difficult for her? And then you move into the illness. That to me was the thing was, it was just so goddamn sad. And yes, I don't think it would have mattered if she had been just a normal family background, or whether she was the daughter of two people who were stars. And she became a star herself. But I don't believe for a second, the way she was showing me things, that this was anything she wanted. I really don't believe that was any part of her plan. Certainly not what she showed me in her early life. So, Carrie Fisher, very strange personality. I'm going to go into let's say the 20s now, and we're going to take it from there. I hit stardom early. I didn't really think I would make it, but here I was. I was Princess Leia. Wow. Then it seemed I was always going to be Princess Leia. Many of the cast were experienced and knowledgeable. Some, like me, were new, mostly to it all. None of us were really sure it was going to make it. We weren't even sure it was going to make the grade. But it was fun. We signed on the dotted line and we hoped for the best. It may have been a flop, but at least we were earning. For any young actor, that was something. But it really kicked off. It was a huge success. Wow, we'd done it. We were everywhere. Billboards, talk shows, you name it. I was young, I was alive, I still had the pills and alcohol, late nights and early mornings. It was unbelievable. I don't think any of us could believe it was so successful. To virtually just come out of drama school and to hit that big, that successful, it was amazing. Everybody wanted to speak to you, like you had really something to say. And then the nightmare kind of hit. It hit me fast. I think the rest of the cast were there was things that bothered them. They were financial. For me personally, it wasn't a financial problem. I didn't like it. I always believed in, if you work, you're paid for it. But this was something else, because they started then making action figures. There was action figures of us all. There was action figure dolls, there was mugs, there was buttons, there was patches for your jeans. And more, who was Carrie Fisher? I myself didn't fully know myself. Now I was someone else. I was Princess Leia. Everybody else was okay. They knew themselves, they knew their character. My problem was I didn't fully know myself at all. So, Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, they were clashing against each other, and I was just losing more and more and more of myself. For other people, I think it's a strange thing to understand, because you've grown up knowing yourself. So if you're an actor or an actress or any sort of a performer at all, painter, whatever, there's a division between yourself and your work. But for me, the two of them are blending into each other. Not that I ever thought I was a princess, far from it. I mean, I hated the way I looked. I really hated my looks. I never did like them to begin with. But Star Wars, I mean, let's face it, there was a ridiculous look there. And yet, at the same time, I was proud of the work that I did. But there was just like a clash of the two things together. Me, who I didn't really know, and Princess Leia, who was a character who everybody seemed to know except me. So that really did create a problem in my life, and it wasn't a problem that went away fast. It lasted. I, Carrie, felt violated. I was violated by Princess Leia's face. It was like Lucas had taken me and he now owned me. And the truth was, and I didn't realise it at the time, he did actually own me. That was the thing. He did actually own me. He owned all of us. Certain settlements were made years later, but truthfully, I wasn't concerned about the money. It wasn't the money for me. I could have been a little bit fed up with that, but the rest of the cast really didn't like it. I mean, they were resentful, very resentful, and I don't blame them. I think they had a right to that resentment. For me, it was just different because I was different. Maybe if I had been a girl of, say, 25, maybe 30, and been around the business longer, maybe I could have taken it easier. But it didn't come easy to me. It was destructive, actually. And yet, it is something that I take pride in. Probably one of the best pieces of work that I've done. And also one of the ones that I'll always be remembered for, which is a nice thing. But on a personal level that no one sees, that you can't explain, you even can't explain it to yourself. This combination of, it was like rice and custard mixed together, and you couldn't take one away from the other. And that did create a problem for me. They knew that these dolls and figurines and everything else that they put out there, they knew that they were going to sell. And they really sold. By God, they sold. So much was made then and ever afterwards, even today. They're still sold. It was probably the first time, I think, that it really ever happened in movies. But it did happen. And it happened without our knowledge. The strange part is, and maybe it's the sad part, and I can admit that now because I'm not in your world, is that I spent the rest of my life trying to buy myself back for me, for myself, for Carrie, to be Carrie Fisher again, whoever she was. And I didn't know who she was. You know, there was different things that I purchased, that people sent to me, pictures, you know, everything, mugs, you name it. I mean, my home was full of it. And it took me a long, long, long time, and it took me to be actually speaking to a very close friend of mine to get to the bottom of why this stuff was so important for me to have. And eventually she kind of got it out of me, and I was trying to get me back for me. That sounds insane. And we all know I had a mental problem. I never made a secret out of that. A lot of people knew it. Then I decided just to be very open about it. Why shouldn't it be? It was my life after all. People were more than happy to make fun of me. Why not make fun of yourself? That's the way I looked at it. Also, I believed it was helpful to talk about the problems. Bipolar, manic depressiveness, it hadn't been talked about before that a lot. And I thought, well, maybe the world needs to see someone that they're used to. Jesus Christ, everybody was used to looking at my friggin' face. You know, why shouldn't I just say it? This is what I am. This is who I am. I never knew how deep that pit went, but it went pretty deep. It certainly wasn't an easy thing to live through. I'll always say the same thing. Pills were a real help. Alcohol was okay. I could take it or I could leave it. It wasn't a big thing with me. Pills were my problem. They were also my saving grace at times. And that's not advocating for anyone to take what I took. Absolutely not. You know, I mean, I was at danger points many, many, many times. So I'm not advocating for anyone to take the direction that I took. Certainly not a road to go down. But for me, yeah, it was my saving grace at times. Sometimes I think I would have went totally insane without them. People noticed. Some people didn't notice. Depended how I was on the day. That would have had a large part to play in it. And I had very understanding friends. I'll be very, very honest about that. People think I had a lot of friends. Let me put it like this. I knew a lot of people. But I didn't have that many friends. That was a different thing. My friends who really knew me knew probably how to stand by me the way that I needed, which was wonderful for me. And for those people, I'll always be eternally grateful. And they know who they are. I don't need to mention names here. Time went on, and I have to admit, I was for a while the girl about town. And where I lived, as I said, I wasn't the first person who was on pills, and I wasn't the first person who was on alcohol, and many people were on both. And wasn't that unusual? As a matter of fact, it was virtually the norm for a lot of us. But I did become the girl about town, and I did have a certain amount of confidence about myself, even if it was a false confidence. It was there. And at that time, it was probably round about the time I met my first husband, who for a long time was not my husband. But he was the man that I kept going back to, and he was the man who kept coming back to me. And I often wondered, was it love? Were we in love with each other? Or were we simply addicted to each other like I was addicted to the pills? I would honestly say, I think truthfully, we were both in love with each other. I'm not sure that either of the two of us knew how to love, how to actually love each other. Because to me, looking at it from where I am now, and even later on in my life, I realised that if you loved someone, you wanted to help them, you wanted to be there for them, you know, when they needed you. And I don't mean when you were drowning yourself in pills. I mean, that's a different thing entirely. You know, you're self-destructing and the other person has to watch that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when something is going wrong in your life and you're finding it very hard to deal with. I think that if you're in love with that person, you want to be there for them. And that person wants to be there for you. And I think that went more one way than it went the other way. And I'm not blaming the person because he was a good guy. But he was also out to be successful. And he had every right to be successful. And what's more, it didn't take a lot for this guy to be successful because he had talent. And I loved that talent in him. And when we were good, we were absolutely brilliant. And when we were not brilliant, we were a disaster waiting to happen. And we happened time and time and time again. And then we'd forget about it. And we'd come back together again. And we decided that we could make it work if we just got married. And we did. And we didn't make it work. Because two people like us can't make anything work. You have to have give and take. Not take, take, take. Not give, give, give. And that's where we both fell down. And I look back and it was sad. It was sad for the both of us. We couldn't even end it with a divorce. We prolonged our agony. You know. But looking back, I can say it was sad. And I'm glad he got everything he got. Because no one deserved it more. No one deserved it more. But that's life for you. No one knows what way that wheel turns. It just turns. And you move on. And you wonder how you ever knew that person so terribly well. You know, you knew the way they put their damn toothbrush down. You know, there was so many small things that you knew. And you can remember them. But you cannot remember the actual feelings that were involved at the time. I wish we could have bottled those feelings, all of us, you included, bottle those feelings and put them on a shelf somewhere. And, you know, on a day when you're maybe not having a great day, you can take that bottle down, you can open it, and it all comes out. And I'm talking about the good stuff. And it makes you feel good again. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That would be magic. The world doesn't live in magic, though. We'd like it to, but we don't. But when you reach this point, this place where I am, those things tend to fall away. And you look back and your memories are just like the tip of your fingernails would have been. They're right in front of you all the time. And they're not bad. They make sense. And that's one thing that they don't make in this world. They don't make sense. And I think that that's what drives us crazy today. It's trying to make sense out of things we can't. And then you get to the other side and everything makes so much sense. And you just can't believe it because it's sort of like, it was so obvious. But you can't see it. Plus, I don't think we're really meant to see it. I think if we saw that down here, it would spoil the whole adventure of life. And I look today and you see kids with ADHD, ADD, kids on Ritalin, depression, manic depression, schizophrenia. We have so many labels for so many illnesses. I know they have to be divided into different categories. But you know, if you really look at it all those illnesses, and you put one word to it, it's just unhappiness. It's unhappiness gone too far in a certain direction. And then the medical profession has got to put a label on it. And that was my label. Bipolar, manic depressant. Fun-loving Carrie Fisher. And yeah, I was fun-loving. But you know, inside, I was a very serious person. What I projected was fun-loving. But personally, me, if you were seriously sitting down having a conversation with me, I was probably the most serious person in the room. But you had to know me. And that's what I said at the beginning. There was always something that I held back for me because I had to. I couldn't afford to give it all away. And I didn't. This is me talking. This is Sharon. I really don't know what way this one's going to go. I have notes, but I also have Carrie. And if at any stage I'm not speaking quickly enough or I'm not making the point she wants made, don't be surprised if she comes in and takes over a little bit, maybe a lot. One of the things that she told me was that it got to the stage with the addiction and all the rest of it, and life in general, I think we would say for her, was that she started getting what you call bit parts in movies. Once the Star Wars thing had kind of worn itself out, not that I think if you're talking to a fan they ever think it wears itself out, but it came to the point where she said it was difficult for the studio to take a chance with her. So she started getting small parts. And she said she was okay with that. It actually, she never craved to be an actress anyway. So much as she seemed to have taken pride in being Princess Leia while hating it, right, there was still, it brought the money in. Okay? Also, I think Carrie needed something to do. And there was work of other types coming in for her, which wasn't acting, but was still in the industry. But basically, she said that the small parts that were coming in, she was happy with that. She was happy with that. And also, she was still on the pills, she was still on the alcohol. So, what I have in notes is this. She just called Brian. And she said, I'd come home. I had made a home with him. And it was as if all my ships had come in. And they all came in at the one time. She got pregnant. And she said that was something for her was a little bit frightening because of her past and something that had happened in her past. So I don't know whether I don't think she'd lost a baby. I don't know what's going on there, but there's something about her past and children or a child or something. But this was kind of like, I'm taking a chance. I'm going for it. And she went for it. And she said that age was also a factor with her. So it did appear Brian, and she said, my husband. So they must have been married, or they were getting married. But she said he looked after her so well. She said one of the things about Brian was he was so dependable, right, that she could actually create a home, and he created the same home with her, and they had a life, and it was a couple's life. They did things together. She said they were very much with each other in step, and so it was natural to go for a child, even if there was a chance that everything may go wrong with the baby. Maybe she would lose the baby. Whatever her fear was, she was still willing to take that chance. And she said one of the things with Brian was he also wanted a child. They wanted things together. They really did. And she said it was the happiest time of her life. Everything was coming in. You know, happiness that she had dreamed of, that other people had, that she didn't seem to be able to hold on to, was right there. When she did have the child, she says, oh, that face. I was never going to let anything happen to that face. That beautiful, beautiful, beautiful child. Now, after the child was born, not immediately, but afterwards, there were problems. And she said, I knew it. I knew that something was not right. Every woman knows when something's wrong. And something was very wrong. She says, I loved this man. The way women should love a man. I loved him. And I still love him. So it's not something that seemed to have died with her. There was respect, and equally it seemed to come across that there was great respect from him to her. Also, she said she still believes that he loved her, but he was gay. And then he told her he was gay. And she said the signs were there. Not the signs that he was gay, he was effeminate. It didn't seem to be that. It was just that he wasn't coming in at the same time that he used to come in. She said he wasn't taking nights away or anything, unless it was business. But basically, he was late. And then there was a reason, there was an excuse. And then she says he didn't make little of me. He sat me down and he told me. And she says the shock took me off my feet. I'll never forget the shock. And yet, somewhere in my own head, I knew it. I'd known it. I'd known something was wrong. And I knew it wasn't another woman. But I didn't think it was a man either. I just knew it was not we're having arguments. Through it all, I was still taking the occasional pill. When I needed them, I used them. And it was killing me, the knowledge that I was secretly doing this. I was doing it behind his back. I was trying to do it behind my own back. And I had this beautiful child. How far could I not take it? I couldn't take it the whole way. I had to be as real as I could be, not as pilled as I used to be. I just had to make it. And then everything crumbled. I always trusted him. I always knew I loved him. I always knew he loved me. Heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. And I was still taking medication. I was taking pills. I was just floating. I was just not there. And he was very, very good. I think that was one of the things that was so hard for me to let go, because he was so very good to me. He looked after me. He cared for me. He was just a very good man. You know, we had so much. And to have someone care for you in that way, it's the way we all want. We all want that caring. We want that hug, if you know what I mean, of knowing we belong. And that's what was crumbling out of my life. That was what was leaving. And he always said that he would be there for me. And he would be there for our daughter. And he was there for us. And I was selfish. I just didn't want to lose him. And I can say now, I didn't want to lose him because I loved him. And it's true, and it was true then too. But a little bit of the selfish Carrie, I wanted him to stay. I wanted him to keep that hug round me. I wanted him to keep me secure and safe and wonderful and everything that I wanted in life that I hadn't had up to that point. I wanted it. And it would have killed him to have had to have done it. And I had to let go. But we did remain very close. And he didn't desert us. Something that was pretty prevalent in my life from time to time. He didn't do that. He remained part of our lives while being with another partner. And then everything around me started to go fuzzy, and reality wasn't reality anymore, and I, who never knew myself anyway, wasn't there anymore, and I was floating, and I was going, and there's nothing more terrifying in this world than to be going in no direction and no security and no safety. And that was a big breakdown. And that was something that is not easy for anybody to get over. And anyone who's ever been there will know what I'm talking about. And for moments he was there, that I can remember, that I can recall him being there. And he didn't let me down. And he never let me down. And coming out of that was probably the biggest fight of my life, was coming back. And it was slow. And I was slow. And everything seemed to be slow motion, like you were moving in slow motion. And maybe that was a good thing, because when you're moving in slow motion, you become very aware of objects and things like that. If you're going to have a glass of Coca-Cola, if you're going to have a cup of coffee. You are aware of the touch and the feel of things. And I'd lost that, and suddenly, and not so suddenly, I was starting to reconnect. And that was a slow process. And for that, he was always there. He took a lot of the pressure off me, and he let me get back on my feet. And eventually I did get back on my feet. And it took a long while, but it was worth it. It was worth it, because I started to slow down, and I started to appreciate things that maybe I'd always taken for granted. And basically I stayed well away from pills, and I raised my child again, and I started working again. I then started writing. For me, just writing for me, but it was filling my day. And gradually and slowly I got back on my feet. And it took a long time. But it didn't matter that it took a long time. It was worth it. It was not something you could have sped up. I couldn't have sped it up if I had tried. And I'm glad, I didn't even make that attempt. Because, I just would have been right back to where I was. And that was nowhere. I don't know if I could have ever come out of that again. So, life kind of took on a new vibe, and I was alone again with my daughter, sharing custody and things like that. And yes, there was many manic moments, right? And things that if you were to watch it would probably be frightening. I think it's always frightening to watch a person like that, although being the person you don't see it, but if I was to see it maybe in someone else, then yeah, it would be frightening. But I did have friends, and they had depression, they're bipolar, but I never saw them in those moments. And I'm not saying I'm glad of it, because I would have understood it, but then it would be like looking at yourself, which would be not what you want to see. You don't want to see yourself like that. So, life moves on, and it moves on for everyone, and it moved on for me. And yeah, my mother was living next door, and that was a blessing. The woman that I'd been so angry with all my life was now the woman that I depended on so much. She was always there. She was like a rock. I'm giving full credit to my mum. She was probably always a rock, but she was a rock then. And I still was in very close proximity with my partner, even though we were no longer together. We still shared a lot of things. We shared discussions about our child. We shared things like that there. He was a friend. He was a friend. And I had to accept that. And I did. And so that was basically life. And it went on, and my daughter grew up, and I got to see different stages of her life and enjoy them. And watch her become a young woman. And that was amazing. It's amazing to watch that little baby that you held in your arms, and then watch it grow into a fully formed, beautiful girl, and know that you actually can take pride in that. That at the end of the day, you help create that. And that was, for me, that was beautiful. And then, like everyone else, she found her way forward in life, and I was so happy for her. And, even at the end of my life, I looked at and I thought, you done a good job, Carrie. You did a great job. With you and Brian together, right? With all the things that were happening and had happened, you could both congratulate yourself. You did a great job. And I was writing at that stage, and then I started writing books and stuff like that there. And people received them well. And I was getting back on my feet again. And quietly, now and again, there was the pills. And then there was also medication I had to take. If you're bipolar, you'll understand that you have to take medication every day. And you have to be very aware of certain things. And if you're manic depressant, you have to be very aware and take your medication for that as well. So there were days, more than one or two or three, where I would have self-medicated myself with pills. But there was a book tour coming up, and there had been book tours before, and it was something that I was not unused to. And there was talk shows and stuff like that. And one of the things I'll say about talk show hosts was there was some, and they were brilliant with me. I mean, they were like old friends. I'd known them before. They'd interviewed me before. And they always kind of made me feel that they were good and they wanted to see me. They were rewarding. They were warm. They made life comfortable for me if I was on their show. And I liked them. I really liked them as people. They were lovely. Where they could have been, asking me very awkward questions, they avoided those awkward questions and they kept to the ones which were okay, not embarrassing, fun, and things like that. So it was a pretty longish tour, the last book tour. And I had my dog with me, and my dog was with me everywhere. I absolutely loved my dog. And what I loved about him was his imperfections. And I remember when I saw him as a pup, it was kind of like, yeah, you're the one. Those big sad eyes, you are the one for me, right? I will create happiness for you. And I've something to love. Because my daughter was older and they don't need you the same way. With this little thing, he needed me and I needed him. And so he became my constant companion. He was with me everywhere. And the fact that he was not what you call in this world perfect was the thing that maybe made me love him more, because he reminded me of me. And I could see all through the imperfections, and I could see people will laugh. I could see the spirit of, or the soul of this dog. That's why I think I loved him more than anything else. It was his imperfections. He was as imperfect as I was. I was having a few drinks, I will be honest with you. Not a lot, but I was having a few drinks quietly in my hotel room. And I was taking a few pills as well. Okay? So I'm going to be very open about that. There was no secret. I'm not going to keep secrets here. There's no point. I'm just going to tell you how it was. But I wasn't feeling very well at different times throughout the tour. And the morning we were actually getting on the plane, I didn't feel great. But I thought, I'm going to sleep through this. I'm going to sleep through this flight. I don't want to be awake through it. I just want to sleep through it. And it's surprising because you get up, you get washed, you get dressed, you get yourself to the airport. You may not be feeling your best, but hey, it's another day. And then what happened was I did fall asleep. And I just remember waking up and being sick and being very sick. Very, very, very sick. And I didn't realize it, but there was a pain in my chest that I realized, but I didn't realize what was happening to me. And what was happening was I was going into heart failure. And basically, there were moments, and they would have been moments, where I would have been aware, and then I would have been unconscious. And that was the end. That was the end of life on your planet, in your world. And I'm not going to say, it came to a drastic end for me. I had had great times in my life. I had had terrible times in my life. I had broken times in my life. I had memories of holding a baby for the first time in my arms. I had a little dog that loved me and that I loved. I had a mother who put herself so far out to be there for me. I had a brother who loved me and understood me. I had friends who knew me intimately, things that I didn't share with other people. And those people kept their mouth shut. And they respected my privacy when I told them things. So, when the end came, was it so bad? Was it really so bad? We're all going to die of something. Why would I be different? There'd be no reason. They tried to keep me going in the hospital. They did their best. But I was going. And shockingly enough, and I will say funny, but not funny, my mum had to come too. I was gone, and within days she had to come too. And maybe that's the beauty of a circle. Our circle. That I had my mum beside me in what seemed like a heartbeat. And so at the end of the day, I looked down on all the people I knew, all the people I loved. I'm always with them, and I think they feel it. Or let's put it like this, I make sure they feel it, but I am always with them. And people will say, oh, she had such a sad life. And I heard Sharon say, yes, she had such a sad life. But at the end of the day, who doesn't have a sad life? Who doesn't have moments where they just go, oh, throw up your hands and give up? That's life. Did I have a sad life? Yeah, there were sad moments. But there were happy moments. There was laughter, there was joy, there was enjoyment. My God, I had friends. I had family. I mothered a child, for God's sake. What more can you possibly want? And I had a man who loved me, as you would love your wife, and who, when he couldn't love me as his wife, was honest enough to tell me and was a loving friend. You don't get better than that. You might want it longer, but what if he had have went before I did? What if he had have went during the pregnancy? He had have died. What would the difference have been? I remember him as a man I could depend on. I remember my friends the same way. I had a good life. So don't feel sorry for me. Don't. There was sorrow, yes. But in your life too, there would have been sorrow, and there will be sorrow. And there'll be happiness, and there'll be laughter, and there'll be birthdays, and there'll be cake, and there'll be a lot of things. And that's what life's about. And the other side is perfect. Don't rush to go there. Just know it. And I'm finally giving this girl a break. And I'm going to say, may the force be with you. Enjoy. Have a good life and have fun. And thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Be good. Wow. Okay. I'm just going to let it be at that. I'm going to say the things that I normally say, which is take care of yourselves, take care of each other. We're all we've got, and we are all we've got. We are. And if we don't value ourselves and value each other, we are not going to be in a good place. So, it's Sharon the Reader, and I'm just going to say, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, because I think this girl needs recognition, and it's someone who posts on YouTube, as I do, and her name is Peaceful Oracle. I have never met her. I know nothing about her. I just know she does tarot readings once a week and once a month for every star sign. And she is fantastic. Do yourself a favour. Check her out. So in the meantime, take care, God bless, and we'll speak soon. Bye.